Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott had their year-end press conferences. What clues did we get about what the Bills are going to do this offseason? I'm breaking it down for you today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Well, folks, welcome in. On Thursday, General Manager Brandon Beane and head coach Sean McDermott had their year-end press conferences, and of course, they got into a lot of the hot button topics. And so I spent a lot of time listening to these and taking notes. And my objective here is to share with you the most meaningful things that I think they said and then add some commentary along the way. And look, Beane went for, it felt like maybe an hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes. Sean McDermott went for right at an hour. So there's a lot of conversation to reflect on. And I'll break it down for you right now, let you know what I thought was the most interesting stuff. And I want to start with just some of their general impressions coming out of the loss in the AFC Championship game. And Brandon Beane was asked the question that I figured he would be asked, and it's the final game. And Brandon Beane has said, in your final game, you find out what your weaknesses are. And I thought that Brandon Beane had a very interesting way of answering this. He said there was no common theme. They didn't play as well in certain areas in that game. He hinted at some defensive injuries and how that affected continuity. Said he didn't want to get into specifics because it's so fresh, but ultimately said they didn't play at the level that they wanted to. And look, Brandon Beane is in this position every single year, and I've heard him be very honest about, hey, we need to score more points. We need to be able to affect the other quarterback more. I felt like he was skirting around, not really wanting to get into it, because I think the reality it is we know it's a defense. The defense hadn't been good enough. And I think the reason he was so calculated and dismissive to an extent of really trying to answer the question was because he didn't want to get up there and throw the defense under the bus when the head coach is defensive minded, and that's been your problem in getting over the hump. And so that's kind of my interpretation of the way he answered that. Brandon Beane was asked about, can they win the big game? And he said, look, until you do it, you'll be questioned. We're right there. We're not getting blown out. You have to do a lot of things to even be in that position. It's not like they're losing to different teams every year. It's a play here. It's a play there. He said, you're never one player away, called it a dangerous mindset to think like that, but affirmed that he believes that the team has championship ability. Comes down to a few plays. You got to give credit to the Chiefs. The entire league is chasing them, but this isn't a situation where they have to tear it down to try to find new answers. He said, we're right there. You got to keep kicking the door until you knock it down. That's their mentality. They're frustrated, but not giving in, and it just makes the chip bigger. When specifically asked about the Chiefs, he said, look, we got to build a team that is built to take care of the division first. And that's your ticket to the postseason. And then when you get past that, yes, you do start to think about the perennial contenders. And of course, that's the Chiefs. They played in 7 consecutive AFC Championship games. Sean McDermott said, no one in this building, including myself, is comfortable or content with where we're at. And I think he's kind of listening to them talking, especially Sean McDermott. Felt like he spent a lot of time really kind of defending the success that they've had. And I don't think he should have to. I think it's pretty obvious that this team has been wildly successful. 5 consecutive divisions, And they've won at least one playoff game in 5 consecutive years. The only team that can say they've done that besides the Bills is the Chiefs. And I think that's kind of being lost a little bit in these conversations right now. You know, you've got everyone in the world suddenly has an opinion on the Bills. And people are helicoptering into this conversation. And I'm reading some of this and I'm listening to some of this. And it feels like they're talking about a team that is perennially 7-10 or 8-9. I mean, this team is absolutely knocking on the door. They've had some great chances the last 3 times to really beat the Chiefs. So I thought it was good that there was some perspective added there. And I think it's unfortunate that that's kind of where you're at. But I think that's the reality, right? Can't get it done. Can't get it done. Well, if they were in the NFC, I bet you they had been to multiple Super Bowls since 2020. When asked about the calls in the Kansas City game, Brandon Beane said it's frustrating. He could only say so much. He believes that Josh Allen got the first down. He said nothing has changed the mind despite the league having communication and sending video. On the Worthy Bishop play, Beane said he didn't think either player had possession. And when the ball touches the ground, someone has to have had established possession, and that wasn't the case. I'd agree with him. And he defended the challenge decision of Sean McDermott because of that. And I think that's pretty good logic. When asked about the defensive line, and this is kind of going to transition into this difference makers conversation, Brandon Beane said they always want to be strong up front and that they would love to add a game wrecker. Sean McDermott said a really good defense starts up front, that it was good at times this season, but not often enough, and said they need to add pieces around what they have. Obviously, you know I agree with that. I think the number one priority of this team this offseason is to go get an impact defensive lineman. I said it last year. If you follow the analysis last year, repeatedly I said my biggest concern, even when people were talking about wide receivers, I said my biggest concern that this team does not have a game wrecker on this defensive line. And so Sean McDermott winds up talking about difference makers, and this is really fascinating to me. Sean McDermott said this. You need 2 to 3 difference makers on each side of the ball if you want to have a chance to get to the Super Bowl. He said, I'm not saying whether we have them or not, but generally speaking, you need 2 to 3 on offense and defense. He went back in and said, look, a difference maker is a player that's top 1 to 5 at their position, but is also selfless, that has the team first mindset. You know, obviously a talented impact player, but it is still about the team. And it has me thinking, okay, well, the Bills didn't get to the Super Bowl. They haven't gotten to the Super Bowl. So that tells me that Sean McDermott doesn't believe that they have those difference makers. So I did the inventory. All right, offensively. And maybe you should do this as I'm doing a little thought exercise. Who are these difference makers that they currently have? And you go offensively. Obviously, Josh Allen. I would say comfortably Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown are difference makers. And I think probably James Cook. That's it on offense. But that meets the 3, right? That's 3 of them. And I think that aligns with how good the offense was. It's the highest scoring offense in the history of the Buffalo Bills. They were top 3 in pretty any meaningful metric of offense that you want to look at. EPA, points, whatever you want to point to. They were terrific. Defensively, who are the difference makers? Christian Benford. Who else? Maybe Taron Johnson. I think you have some other good players. I think Ed Oliver's a good player. I think Greg Rousseau's a good player. I think Terrell Bernard's a good player. Not difference makers, right? And maybe Matt Milano, if he's Matt Milano, he is a difference maker, but unfortunately, despite coming back and being better and better every week, not a difference maker, not this year. So put it all together. Brandon Beane said, we'd love to add a game wrecker. Sean McDermott said, we need to add pieces around what you have. He said, you need 2 to 3 difference makers on each side of the ball to get to the Super Bowl. Come on, let's do it. Go trade for Max Crosby or Trey Hendrickson. Look, I don't know if Max Crosby's available. I think maybe Trey Hendrickson is, and I'd be really satisfied with him, but go ahead and send a first-round pick and a day 2 pick and some change and go get one of these guys, because I think you need that blue chipper. I think you do need that difference maker, especially on this defensive line. And so hopefully I'm reading the tea leaves well there, and if those opportunities do exist, the Bills will be able to get that done, and the Bills will have a game wrecker on the defensive line for the first time in a very long time. All right, plenty more to get to. On the other side of it, we'll talk about the salary cap a little bit, but especially the young players, Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid, and Kyer Elam. That's coming up next, folks. Be sure to stick with me. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can get your taxes done as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so that you can focus on your day. An expert who will find every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, that you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Attending sporting events is an unforgettable experience that brings fans together every time I'm at a game. The excitement, the energy of the game makes for an unforgettable experience. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I'm definitely excited to attend some Bills games next year. They're playing in Charlotte. They're playing in Atlanta. I definitely want to get to those. And I recently used Game Time Picks to find tickets for an upcoming concert. Browsing through the deals was simple, and I found a great value on all kinds of seats around the venue. And the super deal was especially impressive, offering the best value for the event. The app's features like seat views before you buy and all-in pricing with no surprise fees at checkout made the experience smooth and reliable. Plus, the on-time ticket delivery and lowest price guarantee gave me peace of mind. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, folks, let's get into some more of these comments from Beane and McDermott. Brandon Beane was talked about the salary cap outlook, and they both talked about it and said, look, they're in a much better position than they've been in years past. Unfortunately, we don't know what the salary cap is going to be yet, which certainly makes it challenging for them to really plan, and said that, until they know, they'll have to hold off on some decisions. Last year, they got the number just before the combine, and that's still several weeks away. He said, of course, they don't expect to be big spenders in free agency. And look, I've glanced at the upcoming free agency class. There's not a whole lot of stuff that you really want to be a big spender on. I mean, the crop is, you can always find meaningful players, but there's not a whole lot of, I think, break the bank type guys. So even if they did have a bunch of money, I don't think this is a great year to have a bunch of money to spend on free agents. And he did say, look, there's a bunch of guys that are up for extensions that they're going to look into, and again, that they're in a more healthy position than last year. All right, let's get into some of these young players: Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid, Kyer Elam. And both McDermott and Beane were pretty straightforward on these guys. Brandon Beane on Keon Coleman. He said he did some good things, felt like they were on track until the injury. And certainly Sean McDermott said that and really praised his effort in the Seattle game and felt like it was coming along, but they both said they were disappointed in the return from injury. Beane said they didn't see the same player down the stretch, said some of that is youth. He's 21 years old, but also just returning in season from an injury. He said, I don't think Keon's done that before, and said he didn't do it well. Said he wished he finished stronger. Said they've had honest and direct conversations with him. Again, reiterated that he's young. His career is not defined by this season, but said it's ultimately up to him. He needs to work hard this offseason, And Beane said that he has a skill set that he believes can help this offense. That's pretty straightforward. And it aligns with the commentary that I've had as well, where it's like, okay, I'm starting to get excited about Keon Coleman, like that he can really be an asset to this offense, and then he gets injured, which is unfortunate. But after that injury, just wasn't the same guy. Just was not. And so pretty open and honest there. And, you know, you hear him say things like, it's up to him. He needs to work hard this offseason. Gotta recapture that a little bit, you know? And I mean, my goodness, they need him to be a player for this team. So both McDermott and Beane were pretty aligned with how they talked about Keon Coleman. I do think it was interesting how they talked about Kaiir Elam. And Brandon Beane said, look, there's a lot of frustration. It's not how he or we envisioned it. But both of them were very complimentary of how Kaiir has handled the situation. In fact, Brandon Beane said every week he prepares like he's going to start. Sean McDermott praised his work ethic, his confidence, and his preparation. So it's good to hear that, but it's also very concerning that it sounds like he's doing the stuff that he needs to. Working hard, preparing like he's going to start. But the results are not very good. And I get it, he's young. It's year 3. But you'd certainly like to have a little bit more consistency to show for it. I don't want to act like Kaiir Elam hasn't had some good games and certainly made some big plays for this team. But that was a big stage. That was a big opportunity for him. And instead of inspiring some belief that he can be the guy opposite of Christian Benford, I have zero confidence in that. And that's a big priority for this Bills team this offseason. You need a guy to start opposite of Benford. And Rasul Douglas is on the wrong side of 30. I think you saw some age on him this year. I would not bring him back. And I don't think you can go into this thing believing that Kaiir Elam is your answer. So I think you're going to need some type of meaningful veteran, potentially a draft pick, to get the right mix in there to have a player that you're satisfied with opposite of Benford. Let's talk about Dalton Kincaid. And they were very direct here as well. Brandon Beane on Kincaid. He didn't have the year he or we expected. Talked about the injuries. Of course, a torn PCL in week 10 against the Colts. Said he never really came back well from that. Said we believe in Dalton. He's a big part of the plans. No one has lost confidence in him. Sean McDermott called him a really good player, but didn't have the step-up type season that they were hoping for. McDermott said, look, sometimes guys come in and they set the world on fire in their first year, then expectations rise, which is human nature, and then you don't really have the next season that you hope for. But did say that their confidence is extremely high. But both Beane and McDermott talked very directly about the necessity for him to get stronger and add functional strength. And not only to be a better player, and I think that is a very fair criticism of Dalton Kincaid. That's been something I've talked about quite a bit as well. You know, he needs that to be the type of tone-setting tight end to be able to play through contact as a route runner with the ball in his hands, all that stuff. But also to be more durable. And this is where Sean McDermott really went in and saying, hey, he's got to get stronger, not just to be a better player, but so that he can be more available with consistency. And that was the book on Kincaid whenever he came into the league. You know, that was always the commentary. Like, this is a very talented receiver, but he does have to get stronger. I don't love that we're 2 years into his career, and that's exactly the same thing that we're talking about. But I do want to reiterate something about Dalton Kincaid, and I'm going to have some more in-depth analysis on Kincaid. That's certainly going to happen, probably in the Substack. But Dalton Kincaid had a good rookie season. As a rookie, he had the 4th most catches ever by a rookie tight end. In 2023, he had the 7th most catches of any tight end. He had the 10th most yards ever for a rookie tight end and was 10th among NFL tight ends in 2023. Of course, was expected to take a bigger role in 2024. The results did not follow, did tear his PCL in week 10, and he had 18 inaccurate, uncatchable targets. 25% of Dalton Kincaid's targets were inaccurate and uncatchable. Second most among NFL tight ends. So, yeah, this year wasn't the big breakthrough. You know, Diggs is gone. There's targets. They're going to go to Kincaid. Like, I get all that. I wanted that too. But let's not lose sight of the rookie season. Let's not lose sight of the challenge of going from, okay, all right, you're in this mix with all these other players to all of a sudden, yeah, you're going to be a high volume target. Like, there's a challenge that comes with that. And it didn't go like anyone had planned, but let's not bury the dude. He's a talented football player. And obviously this is a big season in year 3. And I'm not saying the heat isn't on. I'm with you. But there's a lot of Bills players in year 3 that it really comes together. Hello, Josh Allen. Hello, Spencer Brown. Hello, Dawson Knox. Hello, Ed Oliver. Hello, James Cook. Hello, Khalil Shakir. Hello, it's just the list goes on and on. So, yeah, it's a big year for him. But I think there's a lot of perspective lost because the lasting memory in our mind is him not catching that pass and really honestly spoiling an all-time moment potentially, not just for Josh Allen, but for the history of the Buffalo Bills. If that ball's caught and the Bills go on to win that game, you'd be watching that play like you did the lateral for a touchdown against San Francisco and the 4th and 2 run against Kansas City. But he didn't catch the ball. All right, we're talking Amari Cooper, everybody eats, James Cook, Josh Allen's contract, Matt Milano, and Matthew Smiley sticking around. That's all on the other side of it, folks. Be sure to stick with me. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw for 1 yard to win. You pair that with one more correct pick, and you are cashing out. This week, I'm looking at the board and selecting more for Travis Kelce on receiving yards and more on those Patrick Mahomes passing yards. What I love most, fast, safe withdrawals. When I win, my cash is in my account in as little as 15 minutes. Check out the promo tabs to tell any of the super sweet Millie winners big game lineups. If you tell a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, let's get into it. We'll talk next about Amari Cooper. Brandon Beane commented here and discussed the challenges of learning an offense midseason. Talked about the wrist injury and said that surgery was recommended, but Amari wanted to keep playing through it. And he said, look, when you add a piece, it's not necessarily just their individual production, but what it does for the group. And said, look, when Amari played, they averaged 7 more points per game than when he didn't. And said he helped the offense even if he didn't have big numbers. Obviously, the Bills have a big decision to make there. He's a free agent. He'll be entering his age 31 season next year. The projections are 2 years, $15 million per, like 2-year, $30 million deal. I think that's kind of the expectation for where Amari Cooper comes in. And on one hand, I can certainly be talked into the skill set and, what it would look like if he had a full offseason in the offense and, of course, establishing chemistry with Josh Allen. But I don't know if I really want to give that to a 31-year-old receiver. I'd like for Keon Coleman to step up and for the Bills to find a field stretcher with that money instead. So I'm pretty indifferent there. I don't love it. I could certainly go without it, but I could certainly talk myself into getting excited as well because I do think pretty highly of what a healthy Amari Cooper is. Brandon Beane on what they learned from the everybody eats philosophy. Beane said he commended the players for accepting roles and being selfless and cheering for each other's success. Talked about the challenges that other teams had game planning and that opponents didn't really know what to expect week to week. Said it's nice to have that balance on third downs. The defense doesn't know where the ball's going. He said they will continue it. They will look for the best players they can get, and they always want it to be as selfless a group as possible. Sean McDermott on if you need a number one receiver, he said, I don't know if you need to have a number one, but you do need to be able to stretch the field horizontally and vertically. I agree with that. And that's been my thought process on this wide receiver core and how to evolve it. It's not necessarily that you need someone to come in and get 120 targets. I don't think that's what they need. I think they need somebody that can come in and get 50 to 70 targets and add a element to this offense that stresses teams down the field. They need somebody that can really win vertically with speed down the field and separation ability down the field and not have to rely on big body dudes to win contested catches to have an explosive play in the passing game. Sean McDermott had some really nice things to say about James Cook. Said he had a great game, obviously, against Kansas City. Said he had a great year and really just praised the development where they said, look, we drafted this guy to be a pass catching back. And he's blossomed on and off the field. He's been part of the leadership council and said that he was in another stratosphere with his intent this season, complimented his physicality for his size. You know, James is not a big dude, right? He's like 5'11", 195 pounds. And, that was one of my concerns with James Cook as well. And I thought he really did elevate his physicality this season. And then he did talk about the end of game where, he didn't really have a role there on that last drive and said, look, yeah, in hindsight, we do wish that he was involved, but of course did reiterate that Ty Johnson is usually the back in those end of half 2-minute sequences. And so it's kind of a tough needle to thread there. Brandon Beane was asked about Josh Allen's contract, which obviously something's got to happen here. He's getting paid like $43 million a season. And there are so many quarterbacks that have gotten paid since, Dak Prescott's at $60 million. You've got guys like Tua and Trevor Lawrence. These guys are getting paid in the $50 million range. Jordan Love. Surely Josh Allen deserves to be paid more than Dak Prescott. And Brandon Beane pretty much said, look, he didn't say that they're not going to work on an extension, but he did talk about the relationship that they have and that they do have a very open line of communication. And they said, look, we talk a lot. We'll have those conversations. I'm not saying it will or won't happen. They haven't approached it specifically, but there will be a time and place. So I don't know when it'll be. I think it probably is this offseason, maybe next year. But yeah, there's going to be a new mega crazy deal coming for Josh Allen and whatever it costs, right? I mean, who are you going to bat an eye at the dollar amount? Is there a dollar amount where you'd be like, yeah, you know what? Josh Allen's not worth that. So whatever it takes, get it done and you figure out the rest. Beane was asked about Matt Milano, said he loves Matt, called it a tough break, missed a lot of time, 14 months off between games. Said it's hard to come back in and get right back to the level you were at before, but said he got better and better. He's proud of him, and it will be nice for him to not spend this offseason rehabbing and instead, getting ready to play a season. And so that'll be nice, and hopefully Matt Milano can stay healthy. And here's the news nobody wanted to hear. Matthew Smiley, Sean McDermott committed to bringing him back in 2025, the Bills special teams coordinator. This is what Sean McDermott said. He said he's done a nice job. Okay, what? Plays have come up. Not happy about those. Called them learning opportunities. Said Matthew Smiley knows he has to be better. Confident that he will learn. And cited defensive injuries as impacting availability of players that would be available to him on a special teams basis on a week to week. Yeah, I don't know about that, Sean. I don't know about that. I think you have 2 years in a row of not just like average or below average. You're talking about bottom of the league, bottom 5 special teams units. It's hard to understand this. If it's a results-based league and you have back-to-back years with those blunders, I don't understand it. I don't. And Obviously, I don't agree with it. I'm not happy about the choice. But this is something that Sean McDermott better be right about. We better look at this Bills special teams in 2025 and feel like it's not only a net positive to the team, but, this is one of the better units in the league. And so, okay, dude, you better be right. Because this is going to be a hot button topic. It's going to be questioned, and you better be right. Because if not, there's not a whole lot of. It's not that there's not a whole lot of that. There's if the Bills have another bottom 5 year in special teams, that's going to be very tough to reconcile when it was obvious to everybody except for Sean McDermott. Better be right, Sean. All right, folks, that's it. Beane, McDermott, year-end press conferences. Those are all the things I found interesting. Hopefully you enjoyed the commentary. Hopefully you'll come back. I got daily content for you lined up all year long. We'll start to get into some assessment next week on a lot of different functions of the team. Of course, gearing up for the different ideas that I'll have to improve the team. So tons of stuff coming your way. Don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.